This is a video tutorial for Phil 123, Module 9 on Descartes and dualism. The topic of philosophy of mind, or we might call this the mind-body problem, the topic for Module 9, has a really kind of complicated terrain. And in the same way that the literature on philosophy of, say, free will has all kinds of different positions, but they're organized around different kinds of ideas, we see something very similar with respect to the positions having to do with the mind-body problem. One of the positions that has been historically very, very important comes from the philosopher René Descartes. Descartes was a 17th century French philosopher. He is widely regarded as the father of modern philosophy, an incredibly important figure. You've heard of Descartes even if you don't know that you've heard of Descartes. If you've ever heard that expression, I think, therefore I am, that actually comes from Descartes. It's not exactly what he says, but it's close enough for our purposes. One of the things that Descartes is famous for is his development of a position that has come to be called Cartesian dualism. Now, if you look at the flow chart that's included in the Module 9 stuff, about the various positions having to do with the mind-body problem, you see that we really do kind of talk about two different kinds of philosophers of mind. One position is a kind of dualism, dual meaning two, and the other is a kind of monism, mono meaning one. Now, the kind of position that Descartes is advocating is really called either substance dualism, a dualism about substance, or it's a position that takes Descartes' name, what we'll call Cartesian dualism. I mean the same thing when I'm talking about each one of them. What Descartes famously thought is that and we've seen this quote before, we've seen the same passage in the literature on personal identity. Descartes thought that he could imagine, that he could conceive of himself existing apart from his physical body. Indeed, he thought he could imagine himself existing apart from any physical stuff whatsoever. And if you think that was conceivable is possible, then it looks like Descartes, the person, the thinking thing, could exist apart from anything physical, which suggests that the thinking thing, this thinking substance that Descartes identified himself with, can't be anything physical. It certainly doesn't depend upon anything physical, but conceptually it comes apart. So Cartesian dualism is a dualism about substance. According to Descartes, there are two different kinds of substance in the universe. One is physical substance. Okay? Physical substance has a particular kind of essence, something essential to it. The essence of physical stuff is that it takes up space. We might say that it has mass, whatever. Descartes said it had extension. And again, all that means is that it takes up space. That's the essence of physical substance. By contrast, thinking substance has a completely different essence. It's to be a thinking thing, right? That's what's essential to thinking substance. And, by the way, for Descartes, that's what you and I are. We should not be identified with our bodies. We should not be identified with anything physical. We are our minds. We are a thinking substance, something like a non-physical soul. Okay. So again, why is Descartes a kind of a dualist? Because there's two different kinds of substance in the world, physical substance and thinking substance, and by the way, you as a thinking thing are essentially just a thinking substance. So that's the position, and I think it's a position that a lot of people, especially if you think a person is just a soul, go in for. Now, keep in mind that we're talking here about Descartes and the mind-body problem. What is the problem dealing with the mind and body that we're supposed to be dealing with? Well, one of the problems, and a problem that Descartes was consistently plagued by, and it's not clear he ever really solved this problem, the problem that Descartes was interested in is the problem of, if you might call it, causal interactionism. That sounds more complicated than it is. It should strike us as pretty obvious that our minds causally interact with our bodies. That so, for example, I have a desire to have a drink right now, or I will that my hand should reach out, grab my cup, and there you go. That's something, if you mind talking this way, that the mind causes the body to do. These sorts of things are not uncommon, right? But notice it goes the other way as well. Sometimes our physical body can cause us to have certain kinds of mental states, or feel certain kinds of sensations. I hate doing this. If I grab my, if I smash myself on the head, right, or if I smash my shin against the coffee table, that's something physical happening to my body. And it causes me to be in a certain mental state. It causes me to be in pain. There's other ways this can go as well. I have a headache because I'm dehydrated. I actually do have a headache right now. If I drink enough water, my headache will go away. Or if I take the right medication, my headache will go away. That too is something physical causing something mental to happen. The alleviation of pain. That's a mental state, if anything is. So it should seem pretty obvious to most of us that the mind and the body can causally interact. The problem that Descartes struggled to explain is, how is this possible? How exactly does a non-physical thinking substance causally interact with a physical body? How does a physical body causally interact with the non-physical thinking substance? How is that even possible? It's not even asking how apples and oranges could work together. It's more like asking how something physical and non-physical could work together. Descartes attempted to solve this problem in a couple different places, but frankly sometimes seemed to misunderstand the phenomenon. So for example, Descartes would sometimes appeal to the pineal gland. If I understand things correctly, the pineal gland is part of your endocrine system. It's below the base of your brain. I might be wrong about this. I'm a philosopher, not a medical person. But it was one of these parts of the body that in the 17th century, they didn't know what it did. So Descartes hypothesized, well, that's where the causal interaction plays. That's where your soul causally interacts with your body. But that's not much of an answer, is it? We wanted to know how something non-physical causally interacts with something physical, not where it causally interacted. How could this happen at all? So this is the problem that plagued Cartesian dualism. And frankly, among professional philosophers today, Cartesian dualism is something like a minority position. But there are plenty of other kinds of dualisms out there. Some of Descartes' contemporaries developed positions like parallelism or occasionalism. These are terms on your handout. They're also in the glossary of the textbook. According to occasionalism, we deny that the mind and body causally interact. Anytime it seems like the mind and body are causally interacting, what's happening is that God is intervening, and he's causing something to happen. God makes it the case, right, that your soul and your body interact with one another or something like that. God's very busy because mind and body and causal interaction, again, seems pretty common. Another position, parallelism, advocated by one of Descartes' contemporaries, the philosopher Leibniz, suggests here too that the mind and body don't really causally interact. Okay? It seems like that. What's happened is that God has preordained, God has designed things to unfold in such a way that we consistently experience mental things and physical things happening at the same time, but they don't causally interact. It's simply because God has designed this pre-established harmony. It appears that every time that I have a headache, I reach for a glass of water, or every time I take a leave, my body aches go away. But that just seems like that because God has designed mental things and physical things to happen in that particular way. It's kind of like two clocks running at the same time. They don't causally interact, but nonetheless, you might hear the one clock strike noon, and then the cuckoo comes out of the other one. It seems like those two things are causally interacting, but they're not. It was just wound up that way. Another more contemporary position is the position that we might call epiphenomenalism. That's a mouthful. Something that's epiphenomenal doesn't causally interact with anything. It is a position that some philosophers have held that mental states are simply epiphenomenal. They don't cause anything to happen. This is going to be very important in the debates about qualia. Okay? And we'll see this when we get to a different kind of dualism. That would be the particular kind of dualism known as property dualism.